The Boeing that was supposed to operate Flight 370 is at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. At this time, Malaysia Airlines technical staff are conducting a thorough inspection of the aircraft, confirming its readiness for the flight. The airliner was fueled and equipped with everything necessary for a safe flight to Beijing. It was an ordinary working day. However, none of the staff could even imagine what would happen in a couple of hours. Passenger check-ins for the flight begins. All 227 people successfully pass security control and board the aircraft. Among them are citizens of 14 countries, many of whom are Chinese. This was a flight that many of them were eagerly waiting for as they were returning home. The crew consisted of 12 people, including Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and co-pilot Farik Abdul Hamid. Both had extensive work experience and were respected among colleagues. The pilots and crew take their seats in the aircraft cockpit. Captain Zahari, having more than 18,000 flight hours, confidently takes control. Passengers gradually settle into their seats and pre-flight preparation begins. The atmosphere on board is calm. All passengers look satisfied and are awaiting takeoff. The crew checks all systems and also conducts final preparations before takeoff. The controller gives permission and the aircraft takes off. Weather conditions are good, the sky is clear. Everything proceeds normally. After a few minutes, the airliner reaches cruising altitude of about 10,700 meters. Passengers are busy with their own affairs, while pilots establish contact with the controller to report on the flight's status and altitude. It remains calm on board. The aircraft moves northeast, heading towards Vietnamese airspace. The pilot reports that the airliner is following without deviations and no problems have been recorded. Air traffic control in Malaysia continued to track the flight and doesn't detect any complications. Work on board also proceeds normally, and the tracking system doesn't detect anything unusual. The automatic data transmission system, known as ACARS, sends a report. It provides transmission of information about flight status and engine operation. Everything is sent to the airline and ground services. However, controllers don't yet suspect that this was the last message they would receive. Subsequently, the system will not function and reports will stop coming. Such a failure may indicate either intentional shutdown or the occurrence of technical malfunctions. The next ACARS report was supposed to arrive in 30 minutes, but this didn't happen. The shutdown of the system configured for regular data transmission became the first alarming signal. From this moment, the situation began to get out of control. This was the last time controllers heard the pilots' voices. Farik Abdul Hamid spoke the standard farewell phrase, "Good night, Malaysia 370. It was addressed to Malaysian personnel. In a couple minutes, the aircraft was supposed to come under the control of Vietnamese controllers as it was approaching their airspace. However, soon neither the crew nor the aircraft would make contact again. The pilots stopped reporting anything, including problems or emergencies. This created the impression that the flight was proceeding normally. After a few minutes, Malaysian personnel finally transferred control to their colleagues from Vietnam. At the same time, their controllers were preparing to contact the flight. However, time passed, and the aircraft never appeared on radars. The transponder of Flight 370, which transmits information about the airliner's location and altitude, suddenly shuts off. As a result, the aircraft disappears from service radar screens. This situation didn't immediately cause alarm, as in zones with unstable signals, aircraft can temporarily disappear. However, in the case of MH370, the system shut down permanently. This became the beginning of a chain of inexplicable events, and only after several hours would controllers understand what was actually happening. Despite the malfunction, military radars continued to track the flight. At this moment, the aircraft makes a sharp turn, deviating from the planned northeast route. Instead of heading to Beijing, it begins moving west. Such a maneuver can only mean one thing: that flight control was changed manually. But Vietnamese controllers don't know about this yet. Military radars continue to track the flight. At this time, it crosses Malaysian airspace. The aircraft moves in a western direction, flying over the peninsula and approaching the Strait of Malacca. Another deviation from the original route occurs. MH370 disappears from military radars. This was the last moment when the location was recorded by any means of observation. At this time, the aircraft was heading toward the Indian Ocean. After the signal disappeared, no one could determine its whereabouts, which caused confusion among air traffic controllers. Later, this event, together with a transponder shutdown in absence of radio control, while satellite systems continued to record aircraft activity for hours. Controllers made numerous attempts to establish contact with the crew. The aircraft should have long ago entered Vietnamese airspace. However, none of the requests were answered. Other airliners in the region also tried to contact the flight, but their attempts were unsuccessful. However, one of the pilots managed to establish contact, but all he heard was interference that gave no clear information about what was happening. Early in the morning, an automatic ping was recorded thanks to satellite communication operation. These signals were part of a system that transmitted data about the aircraft's condition. It's important to note that they didn't contain precise coordinates, but indicated that the Boeing continued to be airborne. Each ping allowed analysts to construct a hypothetical flight trajectory. In a couple hours, specialists would use complex mathematical models to analyze these signals and conclude that the aircraft could have moved either north towards Central Asia or south into the Indian Ocean. This data became crucial for subsequent searches, indicating the possible location of the airliner. At this time, Flight 370 should have been approaching Beijing. After several unsuccessful attempts to establish contact, suspicions began to appear about its disappearance. And now, when the airliner had disappeared from all radars and messages from it stopped coming, a decision was made to declare the flight missing. After 2 hours, Malaysia Airlines issued a public statement confirming that flight MH370 did not arrive in Beijing and contact with it was lost. At this moment, the whole world began following the fate of the airliner. The media began actively covering the situation. Relatives of the passengers organized gatherings to search for information about their loved ones. Posts on social media and mass appeals to the press emphasized society's anxiety and concern for the passengers. Despite communication shutdowns, the aircraft continued to transmit automatic signals to satellite systems. In a few minutes, the last signal would be recorded, which would be a key clue in the investigation. They would establish that the aircraft flew for several more hours after voice contact with the ground. Information from satellites would become the basis for further searches, although it wouldn't specifically simplify the task. The last signal from the aircraft came in. It was a weak sound indicating that the airliner had most likely exhausted its fuel reserves. From this moment, no more signals came in. It became obvious that the situation was terrible and required immediate action. Experts began analyzing the received data, hoping that at least part of the information would allow them to reconstruct a picture of what happened. An international search operation began. Forces concentrated in the South China Sea, where the aircraft finally lost contact with radars. However, analysis of satellite data led to the transfer of the search zone to the Indian Ocean. Many countries participated in the operation, each providing their assistance from military ships and aircraft to satellites and sonar. Australia played a key role in coordinating searches in the southern part of the ocean. Huge areas required thorough investigation, and each country's efforts were directed toward maximum coverage of territory. Advanced technologies were used for underwater research, which made it possible to thoroughly study the ocean floor. However, the aircraft couldn't be found for a long time. After 16 months, the first debris were found on the coast of Reunion Island, a flaperon representing part of the aircraft's wing. The debris was identified as part from the Boeing. Thanks to this discovery, it was possible to confirm that the aircraft indeed crashed in the southern Indian Ocean. The flaperon was the first material evidence. On the coast of other islands, new debris was discovered, including wing fragments and fuselage pieces, which were also identified as part of the missing airliner. Over 2 years, international experts surveyed an area of more than 120,000 square kilometers. However, despite all efforts, the exact crash site was never found, and the operation didn't bring expected results. Therefore, in 2017, the authorities of Australia, Malaysia, and China announced the suspension of searches. Although technical capabilities for continuation remained, the official investigation couldn't definitively establish causes of the crash. Several theories were considered, including technical malfunctions, terrorism, or aircraft hijacking, but no concrete evidence supporting any of the versions were found. The most likely scenario is considered to be deliberate interference with aircraft control, Researchers believe that the Boeing was consciously diverted from its course. This could have been the result of actions by one of the pilots, or an unknown person on board. Thus ended the story of the mysterious disappearance of Flight MH370. If you found it interesting to watch this video, please support it with a like and also subscribe to the channel. See you soon.